Hello, everybody. Welcome to your final lecture on mass casualty incidents. We usually cover this topic the day before we do and run our night scenario if we were meeting in person. However, we are very unfortunate and not able to do that during these times. So follow along with me on these next couple slides. There is no reading on this, but I'm going to do the best I can to explain what these are, how we use them, introduce the incident command system to you, and how we can apply these to an everyday real life emergency situation. All right, so let's talk about what these things are and how we use them. An MCI, or a mass casualty incident, is basically an incident where the number of casualties outweighs the number of rescuers or resources available. And this is going to be based on the number of resources that you have, the number of injuries that have occurred, and basically the severity of the injuries that have occurred in the disaster. These incidents can range from any natural disaster. I work in wildfire and we use these systems every day. A hurricane, an earthquake, to a huge automobile crash. And then as you can see on the screen here, I have a photo of the Boston Marathon bombing. So any terrorism attack, anything like that where if you can think about it, the rescuers or resources available are exhausted by the amount of casualties that have occurred. But this doesn't mean, for instance, if you have 20 victims with super minor injuries, it may not require the MCI system to be put into place. Those resources that are available may be able to handle those 20 victims. However, say there's a big bad car crash and there's 5 severely injured victims to 1 ambulance per se, this could be deemed MCI because the resources or rescuers are not able to handle the amount of um, I guess, victims or the severity of what has happened. All right, next we're going to talk about the Incident Command System, or the ICS. Um, and this is something that, as first responders, especially professionally, um, you have to be trained in. You have to be trained in the Incident Command System and mass casualty triage, basically. The ICS is a standardized system for on-scene management. It's an on-scene management concept designed specifically to allow responders to adopt an integrated organizational structure equal to the complexity and demands of any single incident or multiple incidents without being hindered. So that's a big, long definition. So in a sense, the ICS is this researched and proven true system that we use when natural disasters or MCI occurs to allow proper flow and organization and management of a disaster. As you can see here on screen, this is going to be a basic organizational chart of what an ICS system could look like. I use this every day in my wildfire career. I am in the operations section at the way bottom as a resource. But it follows this general flow, and we are going to be using a different system as at the IFR level, but I just wanted to show you all this because if you want to learn more about this and become trained in the ICS system and mass casualty incidents, there's a ton of free online resources to get this education. So I have to have these certifications to work in my field. It's quite fascinating. If you get onto any MCI or anything like that, you are required to understand this knowledge and the flow of this system. And these can be used in small to large scale events. And it's very important system. So this allows multiple agencies to work together and at an instant. So we can communicate effectively and know each other's capabilities. As you can see here, it's a very clear and organized chart. So it basically breaks down to that one person is in charge of no more than about 7 people. This just allows for better control and communication when everything is like chaotic and crazy. And you can have a disaster that, in this system, there's about 5,000, 10,000 people. Or it could be 20 people, or it could be 10 people. And that's the beauty of these systems. It can be manipulated and managed into many different ways. And on the next slide, we'll talk about how we are going to be doing that as IFers. I'll briefly talk about triaging. MCI triaging is a lot different than normal triaging, like you could do in the hospital or on, normal emergency incidents. It's basically when you have limited resources, you're compressed for time, you don't have that much training, and you're constantly evaluating the situation. All right, one thing I do want to prioritize here is briefly talking about scene size up and MCIs and why it is so important. I know we've preached into you to do those 1 through 5 scene size ups before you enter the scene to initiate contact with the patient, but this is super critical when it comes to MCIs because as a rescuer, your safety is priority. Your resources, if it is unfortunately an MCI, are going to be very, very exhausted. So your safety as a rescuer, you don't want to become a patient is number one. So that's why we first want to identify the type of incident. Was this an explosion? Was it a car crash? Are you in the middle of a really busy highway? Is there any structural damage that, like, say, an earthquake that you were worried about going in? Is there a gas leak, etc.? You're going to want to get an accurate size up to determine the type of resources needed, right? So you come on the scene, something big and bad has happened. Are you going to need more ambulances? Are you going to need more rescuers? Are you going to need more transportation? Is this going to be a complex system? Are they in a ravine? And you're going to need, some sort of rope system. And then you want to kind of get the estimate of the potential amount of casualties. Was there any bystanders? How many people were in the crash? How many people were in the explosion? Just to kind of estimate and wrap your head around what is happening. So there's basically hopefully no more surprises. And like I said, again, your rescuer safety is priority. So hopefully you guys have learned that mnemonic so hard that it is just engraved in your brain. But I just wanted to highlight the importance of scene size up in an MCI because your safety is priority, and identifying the type of incident is going to be super critical here. All right, so the IFR incident command system is going to be a super, super simplified version of what you saw on the previous slide. We've kind of come up with this basic system that you guys can kind of understand at a really easy level and kind of implement it into any, situation. We usually like to run these, like I said, before the night scenarios, so everyone would have a clear designated role, etc., like that. So you would go into the scene with a brief knowledge of what we're looking for. So when we talk about the incident command system, like I said, you can break this down to a very simplified version. So I'm going to talk about all these positions in the next couple slides, but what we have thought to be the best model, we have an incident commander who is at the top, who then is in reporting to the base medic, and then it goes down to the runners, and then we go break it further down into 2 types of teams: transport teams, medic teams. So this is something easily that you can implement into any situation, especially if you have fellow woofers or ifers or anyone else who knows the situation. It's pretty easy to, I guess, put into play when an emergency happens. All right, let's talk about what an incident commander is. So the incident commander, as you can see, is going to be at the top of any ICS system. They have a super huge responsibility. Their role is basically to control every aspect of the emergency response. This is delegated to one person, and they manage all of the incident operations, all of the resources. They're responsible for all the people and persons, victims, patients involved. They're the one going to be making all the informed decisions, controlling those resources. But these people, you're not going to see them running around the incident, anything like that. They're staying at base. So their main job, and why this system is so awesome and works so well, is how it's implemented. So no one is in charge of more than 7 people. So as you can see in the simplified version in the slide before this, the incident commander is going to be only getting reports from the base medic and the runners. So yes, they are in charge of the entire incident and the scenario and the emergency that's at play, but their job is not, it is very important and very stressful, but their job is not going to be as overwhelming because they're only getting reports from these couple people of what else is happening. and they're going to be making the decisions based on what is being reported back to them. There's a saying that the incident commander should have a cup of coffee in their hand at all times. So when I work on fire, there is one person, the incident commander, who is in charge of everything. Um, and this incident could have up to 5,000 to 10,000 people. But like I said, if one person is in charge of no more than or reports to more than 7 people, their job is alleviated a lot more. So in any scenario that you may find yourself in, leadership, and we'll talk about that later, is a huge role in this. So someone establishing themselves as the IC or incident commander is going to be vital in setting up an ICS system in any emergency scenario. Next, we're going to have the base medic position, and this is usually one person as well. With any scenario, you're going to want to establish a base where transport is easily accessible, whether that's ambulance or, car transport, whatever. And this is going to be the base where everything comes back to. This is going to be where the IC lives, the incident commander, and the base medic can set up their little triage area. So the base medic is going to be in charge of the treatment of all the patients that are brought back to the base. They're going to want to have an entire completed SOAP note for each patient when they are transferred over to their care. And they basically get to decide which patients need priority evacuation. So they are in charge of all of the patients, and they are only going to be reporting to the IC and informing the IC of what's happening with the different types of patients. So the IC can control the types of resources needed, if there's going to be multiple ambulances, fire, etc. So they have a very important job, and they may get overwhelmed, and they are going to be utilizing their skills as best as possible. So this person is going to need to be able to handle multiple patients at a time, especially if they are critical. They can also be strong enough to ask for help as well. They can pick and take from, certain teams that may not need that many people, and we'll talk about those in the next couple slides. But the base medic has a huge job. They're going to want to deem which patients are more priority. Obviously the ones with life-threatening injuries versus, walkable, usable types of injuries, etc. All right, next we have the position of a runner, and these are going to be the communicators between the incident commander, the base medic, and the field teams. Communication is hugely important in any disaster, especially MCIs, because there's a lot of chaos going on. And with technology nowadays, especially in fire, we use radios and phones and satellites to kind of eliminate the actual human position of a runner. But we have found out that in the IFR command system, to make this more simplified, face-to-face messages work a lot better. So we have designated someone or a couple of people to be runners between the base, to inform the incident commander basically what's happening in the field and what those teams need. You definitely can use your phones and stuff like that, but brief and prioritized face-to-face messages work a lot better. They can also bring supplies. They can, deem when transport's ready and necessary and activate those teams if they tell the incident commander what's happening. So these people are hugely important to the success of running a smooth incident command system. And you're going to need people that are concise, can keep calm under a chaotic situation, because when something bad happens and every medic team thinks their patient is number one, these runners are going to be very, very exhausted going back and forth between the base and the medic teams, trying to determine who is most, deemed, priority and who's not. So they're going to need to keep a cool, calm head and be able to explain everything concisely to the incident commander so they can make the most informed decision about what is needed. The next two kind of groups are going to be the transport teams and the medic teams. So as the name says, the transport teams are going to be the ones in charge of extraction and basically in charge of all the rescue equipment, the backboards, etc., and whatever else is needed, whether that's ropes, whatever it is that they need to carry or extract that patient out. And these can kind of be, I guess, what's the word, created kind of on a as you go. They don't have to just be waiting there. So these people can be either on some of the medic teams and stuff or be created when transport is needed. Basically, transport teams, they could be up to 7 people, especially if there's going to be someone with spinal precautions needed to be carried out, and there's no backboard available, etc. Um, and they're going to be in charge of bringing that patient safely from the emergency scenario to the base. And this is only if probably the patient is not able to walk or move on their own, or if 2 people, can do a 2-man carry type of thing. The medic teams are going to be the ones in charge of the hands-on medical treatment. So after the scene has been successfully sized up, maybe you go in and do a little bit of triage to get an idea of how many patients there are, type of a thing. And then you're going to want about 2 to 3 people on a medic team, if possible. 3, obviously ideal. 1 person in charge of, the patient's head, the critical care, someone doing all the secondary stuff, assisting that person, and then the third person would be great to have as a scribe, to be getting that full SOAP note. But if you have limited resources like you will have on an MCI, 2 people is great. 1 person is not ideal. You can be very overwhelmed and exhausted, but we'll talk about multi-rescuer situations on the next slide. And these medic teams are going to, like we talk about abandonment, they're never allowed to leave the patient until they're basically transferred care, right, to a higher or same level of care. So you're going to stay with that patient with that transport team until you get back to base, and you're going to transport, and give this person, the base medic, an entire SOAP note of this patient, and then you have officially handed off care, or whether it is straight onto the ambulance, whatever that base medic or that incident commander has decided, and then you will be going back into the field to hopefully help out with more transports, or if there's more patients, which there probably are. Okay, finally, I kind of want to talk about leadership on scene and how it is so vitally important to establish your clear roles and responsibilities. So, what we're trying to do with the ICS and any mass casualty incident is basically to create calmness in chaos. It's a very scary situation when you're dealt with a very small hand with a big accident. If you're either by yourself and you have 3 patients, or if there's 5 of you and you have 100 patients, it can be very, very overwhelming. With all of this stuff that we have taught you as IFers, it's assuming that confidence and delegating these tasks and establishing clear roles and responsibilities. As a true leader, this is going to be the main success to what will help with an MCI. So the ICS system, as you can see, can be broken down to a very simplified version. And so immediately on scene, you're going to gather your scene size up, and you're going to want to establish immediately those clear roles and responsibilities, right? Dedicate someone to be the IC, who's best at making those informed executive decisions, who's best at handling maybe multiple patients, maybe they'd be best suitable for a base medic, who's really good at communication as a runner, and who is good at very hands-on patient care to be one of those first kind of field medic teams. These situations are going to demand a lot of confidence and leadership. If you're good at working in a team, an ICS system will be no problem for you. And that's what we're trying to, unfortunately, we are not able to, I guess, nowadays simulate one of these like we would in our night scenario. But a lot of people, hopefully we will, if you guys come back in the spring and we're allowed back, but a lot of people learn a lot about themselves in these situations. I know I have. They can test you a lot as a rescuer, as a human, especially. But the main thing I'm trying to get at is how much leadership these are going to demand and how well you work as a team in multi-rescuer scenarios. It is so helpful having a partner. And if you don't, then you're going to have to, make those executive decisions yourself. And hopefully we have instilled as much confidence in you as woofers to do that and rely on your fellow teammates. And if other people don't have training, hopefully you can educate those people and use them as your best resource. That's going to conclude our kind of MCI lecture. I wish I had more time and more in-person time to kind of explain this because they are a really cool thing to learn about. And I can post if you guys are interested in all the free online trainings that you can get to get certified in the incident command system and kind of mass casualty triaging and that whole realm. And that's what I deal with every day in my career. And it's pretty freaking cool. So I will leave you all with that, and I'll look forward to seeing you this week.